Evening, y'all. How's it going? Welcome to another Lockdown Live chat. Another month where we dive deep into new talent that emerged during this global pandemic hoo-ha. So we're shaking things up. As you can see, we don't actually have any guests, or do we? In fact, today we're going to be deep diving my co-host's new projects that he has actually taken upon himself. He didn't really have a say. We waited a long time to kind of get to this conversation. So yeah, without further ado, my awesome co-host, the purveyor of all things Dracona Media, Mr. Alec Larsen. How's it going, man?
No, it's all good, man. You know, I've come off some pretty hectic times with work, so it's cool to be able to talk about metal. Like I didn't have a weekend, so it's good to now be able to chat in the evening about the stuff that I do after work, you know?
Exactly, which is kind of the purpose of this chat, because today we're going to be deep diving two of your projects, specifically ones that actually took formation during this pandemic. And let's kick it off with a black metal motif. Let's start with Shadowmourn. Interesting project, kind of a lo-fi black metal type approach. So kind of bring it, like, give the viewers a little bit of an insight into what possessed you to take on this project, and yeah, all of that, especially during these times.
Yeah, so Shadowmourn sort of arose rather out of a formation of a new label called Helico Recordings, and they actually approached me. Well, let's go back a couple of years, and I approached the record owner, Sean Browning of Rottweiler Records, and said, I'd like to do a solo project through you. And he's like, no, I only do bands. And then he then formed an extreme, and his Rottweiler Records was more your like hardcore / thrashy metal. There are some like black metal bands on it, but it's more focused on the lighter side of metal. So there's one South African band called Forfeit the Untrue, that's signed to Rottweiler. It's actually part of the reason I wanted to get into the whole signing through them. But yeah, like the long story short is he was like, no, bands only. And then at the end of 2020, he said, no, I've got this new label, it's more extreme. And with it being more extreme, it focuses on solo bands. So can I sign Incarnate Deity, which is one of my other projects, a symphonic Black and Death sort of project? And I said, no, you can't, because that's got a commitment to another label already. But I have two ideas kicking around in my head. And I said, the one is to sort of imitate Infant Annihilator with the whole over-the-top programmed guitar, drums, vocal, well, not vocals, but programmed everything, you know, like insanely fast, blistering, stupid production. And the other idea is to do basically Mayhem style black metal, you know, old and raw. But when people think of like old black metal, they think of it with like that rose tinted lenses of nostalgia, you know. So what I was trying to do was bring a project about that has that sort of rose tinted nostalgia thought. So what I mean by that is like, it's what you think the production of those older black metals sounded like, not actually what it sounded like, because nobody wants to listen to shit that sounds like it's scrambled through a toilet, you know? So it's modern production, but to sort of emulate that nostalgic, old school, raw black metal sound.
It's almost like it was produced with a purpose of sounding like raw and, you know, lo-fi, if we will. Well, I guess let's actually ask about the name. We've asked all our other guests. Where did the name Shadowmourn come from?
So a lot of black metal bands actually take their names from Tolkien lore. So like if you look at Karachangren, I know also not black metal, but a Monomath, then back to black metal, Gorgoroth. All of those are places in like Lord of the Rings mythology, so Tolkien lore. And I was like, well, Warcraft has some cool lore as well. Not World of Warcraft, but like OG real-time strategy game Warcraft has some cool lore as well. And I went and I looked, there's a sword, demonic sword called Frostmourne, and obviously there was a band called Frostmourne already. So I did some more digging into the Warcraft lore, and I found out that the twin for Frostmourne is an axe called Shadowmourne. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. And that's also why there's a song on the debut EP album, whatever you want to call it, that's called Frostmourne Hungers, because it's like I was going to call the band Frostmourne, but there was one already. So Shadowmourne wasn't taken. That's how it came about.
Well, as a matter of fact, seeing that we're mentioning the EP/album, here this baby is. Should be available across all platforms via Subterranean Music very soon. Thanks again, Alec and the guys at Hager Records for making this essay print available. Looking at this now, man. Now that the album or EP, whatever you want to call it with the semantics, are there any standout tracks to you that kind of gravitate towards now, like listening to it like quite after the fact?
So I wrote Frostmourne Hungers first, and it's basically Freezing Moon by Mayhem. It's that old school chord and then playing through a minor triad, and like that was basically the first song I wrote for it, as almost like a tester to say to Hager, like, is this what you want? But probably my favorite is a song called Six Semper Tyrannus, which is basically a saying about overthrowing tyrants, and the whole song is basically attacking specifically our politicians that loot and rape our country, but I guess everyone can find meaning in it, like, because whether you're dealing with a corporate job that maybe has like super overpaid bosses, or if you're in America and you consider your government corrupt, you know, like anyone can sort of take meaning from it. And, you know, everyone has their own sort of tyrants in their lives. So that's basically where the song goes. But in terms of one of my favorite tracks as well is, it's called The Blasphemer's Eulogy. And it's basically, I have a very big problem with the stereotype in metal, which is like we gotta be evil and, you know, like gotta be so edgy. And it's basically saying like, you don't actually know what you're doing. Like, that's so lame. And like, I actually feel sorry for you if you're still producing music in 2021 that's like the devil's is cool, you know.
Yeah, so kind of putting a spin on the spin, if you will, you know. Tell me, with the album, there was actually on the essay pressing, there was actually a dual piece. It's got two different pieces of artwork that you could use as a front cover.
Yes.
Whose idea was that? How did that come about?
So I actually commissioned a piece from a local guy who runs a website called The Slick. and I commissioned him to do the one that's the like darker mountain piece inside. And when I submitted it to the label, they felt like they would like it to go in a slightly different direction, like lighter, specifically for like printing. Like if you make really dark album art, sometimes printing doesn't come out so well. So they actually sent me artwork that they got commissioned on the side, and they're like, what do you think of this? And I'm like, well, cool. But I didn't want to waste, and that the artwork they sent me is the one that's on the front, and I didn't want to waste the artwork I already had. Plus, also, I think it's really cool to offer something unique, because I am from South Africa, and like labels I've done, records that I've done through labels in the past in the States, I haven't really gotten, I haven't gotten the Incarnate Deity albums yet, because they're sitting in the UK because they couldn't send them to me in the middle of lockdown. So I actually got them sent to my brother-in-law in the UK. And with this album, I was just like, well, it's cheap enough to print some CDs. And I was like, well, if I'm going to do that, I have this extra artwork. I may as well do something nice for South Africans, you know, because this is technically only a South African edition, you know. The international edition, I still encourage you to go and order it via the sort of Haga recording store.
Right. Yeah, they do have copies available on their Bandcamp, limited numbers available. But yeah, definitely worth getting the import if you're into that sound. So that's Shadowmourne covered, I think, briefly. Let's move on to something a little bit more nastier, a little bit more brutal, if you will. Let's talk about another project that has kind of taken a lot of your interest, a lot of your time, and that's the slamming death metal project Hilliker. It's also an interesting one because obviously facilitates something that's very brutal and very pummeling, but with production nuances way more towards the modern sound. So yeah, let's actually kickstart with the name Helico. Where the hell did that come from, and the whole theme around the project?
So it's interesting. I kind of don't like stereotypes when it comes to metal. So if you look at like slam and stuff, there's almost rules that you have to have like a medical condition as the name, or you have to have something completely disgusting. There has to be like objectification of women. There has to be implications of rape or bestiality or sexuality, like really totally nasty stuff. And I was just like, I want to just go back to like the roots of like death metal, which is murder. If you look at Cannibal Corpse and all that stuff, they have some nasty album covers that have some sort of sexual undertones, but I sort of stay clear of that. In terms of the name, there's a little movie series called Wrong Turn, and it features some cannibalistic brothers called the Hilliker brothers, which you only find out their sort of surnames in Wrong Turn 4. And when I heard their surnames, I was like, well, Hilliker's kind of arbitrary, because there are actual people with the surname Hilliker. It's like a actual surname. It's not like they sucked it out of their assholes to make a movie name, right? So I was like, well, it's sort of obscure enough, but it's also like people that are fans of that movie series will probably get the reference, and they'll definitely get the reference when they see the sort of lyrical content, because it is pure murder and cannibalism and all that friendly age restricted stuff, you know.
Yeah, definitely fulfills the vibe of almost that hillbilly-esque mutilation type scene. And like you say, it's about murder. like murderers don't judge sexuality or any of that, they just kill. So
Yes.
it's kind of across the board. Another thing that was very interesting about this, because I've been fortunate enough to hear quite a bit of the upcoming album, which hopefully you will be able to shed a bit of light on to like momentarily. But the one thing that you really did put a lot of effort in is actually incorporate a lot of collabs on this. Actually, a bit of variation in terms of different vocal dexterity from a lot of different vocal artists. So maybe you want to go into a bit of the psychology around that. Well, what persuaded you to go along this, no doubt, more strenuous mission in actually gathering all these vocals from all these different artists?
Well, yeah, like you hit the nail on the head, right? It's easier to do everything yourself. That's why I do solo music. But sometimes it's really nice to, you know, showcase some local musicians. So I'm not going to obviously go into too much details because the Hilliker page still needs to announce a couple more guest vocalists, but we have some crazy good South African vocalists that I wanted to showcase as part of the album. But I've also got a few internationals as well, so hoping to gain that sort of street cred. You know, if it's good enough for so and so, if it's good enough, well, I've announced them. So if it's good enough for Larry Wang from Gorepot and Maggot Colony and Umbilical Asphyxia and basically every other band out of Taipei, then, you know, it's good enough for me as a international slam fan, and in so doing, maybe shed light on some local vocalists. So the two that I've announced are my wife Chelsea and Theo Durand, both of them having crazy vocal capabilities, and it'll be nice for them to get some, you know, international exposure at the same time.
Definitely. Resurrection of Fetal Remains is probably one of South Africa's most brutal slamming bands. So they still have like quite a bit of a groove-laden sensibility about them. So yeah, definitely will be interested to hear how you guys team up and the final master and all. But I guess now that we were talking about Resurrection of Fetal Remains, we talk about all the rest of the big bands that are going to be performing in Joburg at the end of November for Johannesburg Death Fest. Obviously, the who's who of brutal slamming death metal here in South Africa, with a couple of other guests, but obviously Hilliker is omitted from that lineup. The question has to be asked, and it's something that you and I have both asked all of our guests, and I have to ask you, is there any possibility of ever translating this project into a live performing band post-pandemic?
Well, actually, I do have members sort of in mind, and guys that have all given me the, you know, the like that, yes, they'll be involved, sort of green light. But I won't divulge them just in case, you know, they decide they don't want to eventually. But yeah, it basically, if we post-pandemic, if there's like a Wacken battle, I'd like to participate in that and go like full over the top, you know, all of us wearing fucking dungarees, and I'll be chewing on like raw steaks on stage and covering myself in like gore and stuff like that, you know, just to embrace the hillbilly aesthetic. And wow. Yeah, I mean, maybe our international or our viewers that don't really know me, so they don't know that I'm a foreboding 6'5", 130 kilogram hulk of a man. So I think it'll be really cool to have that sort of live performance. Other than that, because the members that I have in mind, some are based in East London, some are here. You know, it would really have to be a case of like the album does well and we're offered to play, what's that Czech festival called, Obscene Extreme or something like that, you know, one of these like things that are niche enough that we would be able to do it, you know, and not expect crazy money, but then we'd like play a couple of shows in Europe, and, you know, like that's the kind of thing that I could picture Hilliker doing. I don't think we'd like get together to play a 50-person gig in South Africa. Like, it just, as arrogant as that sounds and whatnot, it's not like I haven't played enough of those shows in other bands, you know.
That's true. That's true. Well, I mean, again, like if there's the right reason and the right motivation, like when we had Duncan Evans on last week talking about like if there's a motivation to end in like an organizer that's willing to go pull the talent through to their festival or their venue, then, you know, maybe it's worth the effort. Yeah. But I guess you did mention that, and I guess as we kind of start to round off this conversation, the whole thing with these projects is obviously creating a lot of like new music during this pandemic. How have the other bands been? And like obviously you're involved with Aberrant Anomaly, which also actually was quite active during this period. So yeah, what is actually coming up in the future besides from the Hilliker album, which actually, let's hear about that, you know, and what else is in the cards?
So the Hilliker album, you would know, at the moment I'm not in a rush. I have basically the final masters. Well, almost, you know, like there's little tweaks. And I'm trying to still decide whether I want to add some like, you know, extra samples, like some like industrial effects and like blood splats and all that good stuff into the backing of all the tracks. So I'm still working those sort of things out, but I'm not in any rush to release that because I've released enough music where I know that like you can't just say, cool, it's done, let's release. You know, you got to build the excitement, you got to do something. So with Hilliker, that's the sort of next steps is to announce who's in it, the album art, you know, maybe do another lyric video, maybe almost like lo-fi music video. But besides Hilliker, dude, there's so much music. It's actually a joke. I have a project with my wife Chelsea called Azul Narub, which also takes its name from Warcraft lore, and it's actually all the music is written by Alan Perkis, who's the producer that I use all the time, and he sent me 17 tracks, and he's like, I want to make music out of this because yeah, he wrote music for a vocalist who then proceeded to fire him. And he's like, well, now I've got all this music, you know? So it's cool, like Egyptian style, symphonic black and death metal, but very, very, very sort of Egyptian scales. That's sort of in the works, but, you know, it's his band, so however long he wants to take to do things. Like we recorded a single at the end of last year, and he's still mixing that single. You know, so he's doing it when he wants, which I'm fine with. So there's that as Azul Narub. You also remember that the Sepulchre of Man single came out at the beginning of this year, and I was supposed to, you know, carry on with that, which I probably will do. It's just, yeah, life's been a bit hectic at the moment. In terms of other music, I have that synthwave project that also came out during lockdown called Source Control. And that, with that project, I'm actually trying to self-produce now. So the original EP was produced by Alan, but now I'm self-producing singles, and I want to try do like a single a month basically going forward. And the first couple of months are going to be covers. Like I have ideas for like the Power Ranger theme song and Mortal Kombat, and maybe some KMFDM, because it's all synthwave based stuff. I'm always also jotting down riffs for the next Shadowmourn, because that's also something like the last Shadowmourn album I wrote and recorded and mixed and mastered everything myself, and it took me a week during the December holiday, and it came out well. It's not that it was just like I didn't care. It was just like I hadn't written music for a while, so it was a super productive time. Beginning of 2020, I announced that we were working on the Certus album, and then because that's a full band, we haven't really been able to get together. So since the beginning of 2020, I've actually had everything's recorded except for the vocals for the whole Certus album. 2020. So I've been sitting on the music for basically 2 years, almost. So that's that. But also, like, it's all this music, getting it produced, getting artwork done, stuff. It becomes like quite an expensive exercise. So going
you
forward,
want it done right.
Yeah, I want it done right. So stuff like Sepulchre of Man and Certus, I've set a precedent. It has to be produced, to a certain level. I actually would like to write something that's symphonic, that is self-produced, because I do have I have quite a lot of VSTs that I could use to do that. So because I owe the label a second Incarnate Deity album, I'll probably do that, but I'll self-produce that. Even though the first one was produced by Alan, it sounds like killer. It's just I can't keep investing like tens of thousands of rands into an album and get very little back for it. So realistically, I need to look at what I want to go get produced properly and what I'm happy with producing myself. So stuff like Shadowmourn, I can literally spit out tracks, and the new Source Control stuff, I can spit out tracks because all it costs me is my time.
It's actually, yeah, it's a good way to look at it. But it does hold like a lot of positive, in the sense that there probably will be a lot of new music coming out regardless, because of the fact that you will be producing a lot of new music regardless.
Yes.
So yeah, looking forward to that, man. I guess, yeah, as we kind of wrap up this conversation and this awesome chat about all things black metal and brutal slamming death, I guess trying to tie a bow on the entire almost 2 months of diving into new talent that's emerged during this pandemic, what are your thoughts on all the bands that we've been joined with, all the thoughts about them, the motivations? It's been quite inspiring, actually, from my perspective. I'm curious to get your thoughts on our little run that we've had now.
I think it's really cool that guys have, started stuff, produced stuff. I mean, a lot of people haven't been fortunate enough to have like decent jobs where they could work during lockdown. So obviously all that free time, it's better than watching YouTube videos all day. So like, don't get me wrong, I watch a lot of YouTube, but what I'm saying is like,
shout out to all the YouTube viewers watching us, by the way, now.
But yeah, like I'm glad that some people have, you know, been productive with the time that they've been given. And I'm also glad that like people with me that still have crazy work schedules, you know, are still able to find a creative outlet, because yeah, music is music is 100% necessary in my life. So I'm pretty sure it's in a lot of people's lives. But yeah, it's awesome to be able to have chatted to the guys and discovered all this new music, you know, hearing some of the like crazy heavy stuff that's come out. You know, so it's really cool. One thing though that I can say, and this is not even like this is a weird plug to sort of plug. It's I've become addicted to a band called We Butter the Bread with Butter. And
oh gosh, yeah, I know those guys. Yeah,
it's so weird to be this like death metal musician, extreme metal musician that like loves some German party metal. So, and yeah, that's a new discovery for me during lockdown. So I'm sort of counting it as part of the last 2-month journey.
Yeah, we've definitely gone down a rabbit hole here now. It's like, what has this pandemic done? Oh gosh. Well, yeah, man. I guess at that point, I guess we can wrap up this awesome chat. Thanks so much for taking a bit of time out to chat to me again.
Yeah, again.
Again. Next week, for everybody that's watching, we'll be back. We're actually going to be shaking it up. We're bringing back from next week all of our old favorites from the first run of these lockdown chats, which actually now on this count is, I think, our 63rd episode. So crazy. Yeah, Alec, we're keeping it going. We're going to bring back some guys that we haven't spoken to in over a year. So yeah, let's see how the guys have been doing. No real expectations, but you know, I'm confident we're going to see some new stuff and hear some new stuff coming from the vets soon. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks again, Alec, for joining. Thanks for making this happen. Keep on rocking. We'll keep on listening. And to everybody watching, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. That helps. And yeah, we'll be back same time, same place next week on the interweb. Keep well, guys. Have a wicked week ahead. Laters.
Peace.